I don't think there's any question but that the Book of Mormon was in some ways, and what I'm about to say I don't mean to be irreverent, the Book of Mormon in some ways was to the Latter-day Saints what the resurrection of Christ became to the early Christians. The resurrection was the physical manifestation of Christ's divine sonship. They had questions, the disciples, the apostles had questions about so many things, but two things happen. The resurrection takes place, and the Holy Ghost is poured out on the day of Pentecost. And suddenly they see things with new eyes, and that resurrection was the clincher for many of them. All that he said was true. It was the manifestation of the truthfulness of who Christ was and what he taught. In a lesser sense, but in a similar vein, the Book of Mormon was the symbol, the representation, the embodiment of the notion of the fact that God has begun a new revelation. And many of the saints read it and knew it quite well. Many did not. It isn't they didn't think they needed to. It's just that it stood as that great symbol of the revelation. I remember talking with my friend Richard Mao, a beloved friend who was for many years the president of Fuller Theological Seminary. And the way Richard describes Joseph Smith and Mormonism, he said, it isn't just that Joseph Smith comes along and says, I've come to restore the notion of the gift of prophecy. He says, no. Joseph Smith comes along and announces, and the Mormons announce, that what's been restored is the prophetic office. And that's a different thing entirely. And I think the great manifestation for those early saints that the prophetic office had been restored and that the heavens were once again opened and revelation was flowing, the great embodiment of that was the Book of Mormon. And so I believe there were many who held it up who weren't as familiar with its text as they might have been, or others were, but for them it was sufficient evidence God had spoken.